Good morning to Canada, good afternoon to Switzerland. On behalf of the organizers, I take great pleasure in welcoming you to the first Swiss-Canadian Cleantech Innovation Summit. The summit has been jointly organized by the Swiss State Secretariat for Education, Research and Innovation, the Swiss State Secretariat for Economic Affairs, the Embassy of Switzerland in Canada, Global Affairs Canada, Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, and the respective embassies in Bern and Ottawa, as well as the valuable support of InnoSwiss, Switzerland Global Enterprise, and the Swiss National Science Foundation, as well as the National Research Council of Canada. My name is Nick Beglinger. I run the not-for-profit Cleantech 21 Foundation in Zurich, Switzerland. We specialize on regulatory and technical innovation to fight the climate and biodiversity crises. Moderating a panel of two global innovation leaders is what in Switzerland you call a Schoki job, meaning a chocolate job, meaning an easy job. But actually, the point is exactly not to think of Switzerland in terms of chocolate, but of Canada in terms of maple syrup. The aim is to think about innovation and, to be precise, innovation in cleantech. In the coming 2 days, we want to together explore what makes for an effective cleantech innovation ecosystem, how Switzerland and Canada can approach this innovation task together, how specifically US companies or in the academia get your hands dirty and contribute to this important innovation in the cleantech area. On both days of this innovation summit, we'll have two panels, and the panels follow, what follows the panels are breakout sessions. In the breakout sessions, it's really about talking with each other, about networking, and about getting actual cooperation for innovation started. Which brings me to the first introduction. I have the huge honor to pass the word to Swiss Federal Councillor Guy Parmelin, who will give us an introductory comment from his side. Unfortunately, Federal Councillor Parmelin is suffering from corona and is currently in isolation. So the statement that we're hearing was recorded last week. Federal Councillor.
Dear Honourable Minister Champagne, dear Honourable Minister Eng, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Switzerland and Canada are two countries united by friendship, which have many common characteristics. Both Canada and Switzerland are home to breathtaking landscapes, such as beautiful mountains, lakes and rivers, vibrant forests and meadows. Our countries are united in the fight against climate change, both in our own countries and on an international level, to preserve what we have and to take care of our future. In addition, both Canada and Switzerland are home to world-class academic institutions and are places where research and innovation results in economic success and growth. We are both committed to cultivating talent as our most important resource in the search of innovative and creative solutions. We also know that collaboration between science and industry, as well as international exchange, cooperation and trade, are important drivers for promoting innovation, competitiveness and prosperity of our two countries. This was underlined in the joint statement in the field of science, technology and innovation signed by Switzerland and Canada in Davos in 2018. It is therefore my great pleasure to open this virtual Swiss-Canadian Cleantech Innovation Summit, a pioneer project co-organized by the Swiss State Secretariat for Education, Research and Innovation, by the Swiss State Secretariat for Economic Affairs, by Global Affairs Canada, and by Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, as well as by both our embassies in Bern and Ottawa. This summit provides both our countries with a unique opportunity to explore potential collaborations between science and business and offers a platform to discuss the Swiss and Canadian innovation ecosystems. It also showcases best practices of Swiss and Canadian collaboration and explores innovative ideas at the interface of science and business in the cleantech sector. I am impressed by the program our two countries have put together today and tomorrow, and I hope that this summit will provide the impetus for future collaborations between Swiss and Canadian stakeholders. Let me conclude by thanking Ministers Champagne and Eng for co-hosting this summit with me. I hope that we will soon have the pleasure of meeting in person.
Thank you very, very much, Federal Councillor Parmelin, for your valuable insights. Of course, everyone here wishes you a speedy recovery. Now we have the privilege to hear from Deputy Minister Simon Kennedy speaking on behalf of Minister François-Philippe Champagne, who leads Canada's Ministry for Innovation, Science and Industry.
Well, first, I would like to thank Councillor Parmelin and the summit organizers for inviting me to join you at this important event. And like others, I wish the Councillor a speedy recovery. My name is Simon Kennedy. I am the Deputy Minister of Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada. And on behalf of Minister Champagne, it is my pleasure to jointly open the Swiss-Canadian Cleantech Innovation Summit and to welcome you to the first day of the summit. I would also like to acknowledge that I am coming to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people, the indigenous peoples of this land that I am joining you from here in Canada. Canada and Switzerland enjoy much in common, based upon our shared values and a commitment to democracy and human rights. Nowhere is this more evident than in your country's decided stand against the recent Russian invasion of Ukraine, standing resolutely with countries such as Canada in opposing this unjustified war. Canada and Switzerland also find common ground in trade, investment, and innovation. In 2018, Canada and Switzerland signed a joint statement to encourage the deepening of bilateral cooperation in the fields of science, technology, and innovation. This summit on cleantech innovation is an excellent matchmaking opportunity to help Canadian and Swiss businesses and researchers connect. I note that our National Research Council's Industrial Research Assistance Program and its Swiss counterpart, InnoSwiss, have been collaborating in recent years. Their work has been closely followed and supported by the Embassy of Canada to Switzerland. In closing, I'd like to emphasize how important cleantech is to fostering innovation and driving economic prosperity. Last year, Canada provided $17.6 billion towards the support of a green recovery to create jobs, build a clean economy, and fight and protect against climate change. We believe investments in clean tech are key to meeting our climate goals and protecting our planet for future generations. And with that, I'd like to say that I look forward to hearing more about this summit's outcomes. Thanks again for inviting me today, and best wishes for the summit.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister Kennedy, for your insights. I now have the privilege to introduce to you Her Excellency Martina Hirayama. Since 2019, she is State Secretary for Education, Research and Innovation. Before that, State Secretary Hirayama was the director of the School of Engineering at ZHAW, which is the Zürcher Hochschule für angewandte Wissenschaften, or in English, the Zurich University for Applied Sciences. State Secretary Hirayama studied chemistry in Switzerland and the UK, and when she thinks about Canada, she thinks about a large country with wide open spaces, natural beauty, but she also thinks about innovation by thinking of the innovative minds and the excellent universities of Canada. State Secretary, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Honorable Deputy Minister Kennedy, distinguished guests. I'm very delighted to share the stage with Deputy Minister Simon Kennedy for this Swiss-Canadian Cleantech Innovation Summit that is the first of its kind and will hopefully be the launch of many successful cooperation initiatives in the days ahead. In our globalized world, no country is able to face the challenges of our times by itself. We all see how digital transformation is having a profound effect on individuals, society, and the international economy. Climate change and the threat to biodiversity and clean and sufficient energy supply not only question economic growth itself, but also accelerate endeavors to develop innovative, smart solutions. Switzerland experiences these transformations like Canada does, and thus it comes as no surprise that Switzerland strives to be heavily involved and act as a reliable partner in top-level research and innovation in a global environment. Canada shares very similar values, which makes us, in many respects, natural partners. As partners, we are curious to learn from each other. Therefore, I'm pleased to highlight some aspects of Switzerland's recipe for a successful innovation policy. The first ingredient is the high degree of autonomy for funding agencies, universities, and research institutions. Universities, research institutions, and companies share similar needs, such as a highly qualified workforce, clear and favorable rules and regulations to ensure fair competition, autonomy, links to the international community, and sufficient public funding for universities and research institutions. Once these needs are covered and combined with favorable innovation conditions for companies, we are approaching the ideal framework that the Swiss Federal Education, Research and Innovation Policy aims to create. The second ingredient to our recipe is our education system. We have a strong dual-track vocational education and training system and excellent universities. For our competitive and innovative economies, a skilled workforce along the entire innovation and value creation chain is of vital importance. Through our permeable education system, we create the workforce that is needed in the labor market. The third and last ingredient is a cautious approach to an imposed innovation policy. Switzerland, unlike many other countries, does not have an explicit innovation policy. Instead, we focus on implicit measures to promote innovative activity. Compulsory schooling is public and free to everyone. The government co-funds the system of vocational education and training, which is run by the cantons and professional organizations. The government is the main funder of basic research across all branches of science, open for bottom-up defined research topics. The government also funds the innovation promotion agency InnoSwiss. It provides a link between our universities of applied sciences and private sector entities interested in a public-private partnership. Finally, the federal government is the enabler for Swiss players in the field of research and innovation when it comes to international cooperation. And Canada is without doubt a very important partner for Switzerland. Our cooperation with the European Framework Programs or Eureka are just a few examples of where our two countries work closely together. So let me conclude with a question. What does innovation mean? It means identifying challenges, finding marketable solutions, and making our lives a little easier and our world a little better. In Switzerland, we have brilliant minds and a wealth of talent that is actually capable of bringing great ideas to life. The same is true in Canada. So would there be anything more obvious than for us to come together today and figure out how to realize the full potential of our collective innovative power? Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, State Secretary, for these clear remarks on the recipe for success of innovation in Switzerland and also the positive outlook for cooperation between Switzerland and Canada in this field. I now have the privilege to formally introduce Deputy Minister Simon Kennedy. He's been in this position at the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Economic Development since 2019. Before that, Simon was Deputy Minister of Health, and in that position had to take care of such challenging issues such as the opioid crisis or also the legalization of cannabis. He studied international relations in Canada, in the US, and at INSEAD in Europe. And when Deputy Minister Kennedy thinks of Switzerland, it's the Matterhorn that comes to mind for him first, and then the strengths of Switzerland in life sciences and pharma, which is a great start to innovation in clean tech as well. So with that, please, Simon, the floor is yours for a second time.
Thank you very much for the introduction. And also thank you to State Secretary Hirayama for your insightful remarks on the Swiss innovation ecosystem. I'm very pleased to be part of the panel today. Climate change is a shared global concern, and events like today are really important to ensuring that we work through these issues together and we make progress together to advance innovation in clean technology. In Canada, we believe that innovation is going to be key to our ability to shift to a low carbon economy. And this is not something we're going to be able to do alone, which is why working with partners like Switzerland is so critical. And we have to learn from others. And so I'm really pleased to be part of the panel today. My department, Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, is the Canadian federal department that leads the Government of Canada's efforts to enhance Canada's innovation performance. And clean technology and technologies to support better environmental performance are a key part of our work on innovation. And so I thought what I could usefully do from my introductory remarks as part of this panel is to just talk a little bit about our flagship policies and programs in support of Canada's innovation ecosystem. So in order to do that, I have to take you back to 2017. At that time, the Government of Canada undertook a major redesign of the federal innovation policy landscape in Canada and introduced what it called the Innovation and Skills Plan. And that plan is focused on making Canada a world-leading center for innovation to create, more well-paying jobs and that can contribute to national prosperity. And I would say that, net zero, and carbon reduction technology and clean technology is a very significant part of the Innovation and Skills Plan. As part of the Innovation and Skills Plan, Innovation Canada was created. This is a branch of my organization which brings together all of the business innovation programs that we deliver under one roof and is designed to present a single point of contact for the business sector for innovation support and to provide supports across the innovation continuum from the creation of new ideas all the way through to their commercialization and scale up. Its programs and services are designed to support firms across key areas of the Canadian innovation ecosystem and at all stages of business growth. As one of the flagship innovation programs that we put in place, we created the Strategic Innovation Fund. It's colloquially known in Canada as the SIF. The Strategic Innovation Fund provides federal funding to help position Canada to prosper in the global economy. It targets large-scale, transformative, and collaborative innovation projects with industry. To date, the program has supported about 100 projects in business innovation, with a total of about 5 billion Canadian dollars in government funding, creating about 88,000 jobs in total through the projects that it's supported to date. Last year, in the federal budget, as part of the Strategic Innovation Fund, the government created a new business line as part of the fund called the Net Zero Accelerator. And it endowed the Net Zero Accelerator business line with $8 billion in new funding for projects that focus on reducing Canada's domestic greenhouse gas emissions. This again is known as the NZA or the NZA, the Net Zero Accelerator. The NZA will support the transition of Canada's economy towards a low carbon future through projects that advance innovation, technology adoption, and commercialization of new Canadian clean technologies. So we have significant industrial support funding to work with the business sector on clean tech, on decarbonization, and on green technologies. Another major instrument that was put in place as part of the Innovation and Skills Plan is the Superclusters Initiative. The Government of Canada invested about $1 billion over 5 years in the Innovation Superclusters Initiative. This is a co-investment with industry to build accelerated, innovative ecosystems in key areas of the economy. And the way I like to think of this is that we have these areas that are quite innovative with a lot of activity, but for whatever reason, they haven't necessarily obtained, say, the critical mass of a Silicon Valley. And the idea of the superclusters initiative is to incent and encourage that critical mass and encourage those connections so that we build these clusters. The superclusters are independent, not-for-profit organizations that are designed to move at the speed of business. They're business-driven. They're designed to respond to conditions on the ground and to capitalize on innovation and market opportunities. The superclusters have brought together more than 7,000 members across sectors that would not have otherwise necessarily forged partnerships, including partnerships among startups and large firms, post-secondary institutions, research organizations, and governments. And the federal funding that has gone to these superclusters, which again are business-led, they have business, leadership, they have independent boards of directors, but the federal funding is designed to incentivize these relationships among these various players. There are 5 clusters that we have supported through the Superclusters Initiative, and those focus on digital technologies, protein industries, because as you might know, Canada is a large agriculture and agri-food producer, so protein industries is the second one, advanced manufacturing, AI for supply chain, for supply chain efficiency, AI-powered supply chains, and our ocean economy. Superclusters are really about creating new future economic opportunities with input and leadership from industry. And they really are about innovation because they're designed to bring together different players from across Canada that may not otherwise have worked together to find those synergies. I would note that Jay Myers is with us today in the panel, who is the CEO of the Next Generation Manufacturing Supercluster. So the supercluster focused on advanced manufacturing. They're doing really incredible work, and so looking forward to Jay's presentation. The last tool that I would note that is part of our innovation and skills plan is what we call the Accelerated Growth Service. And this is really designed to provide high growth firms with single window access to government programs and services and assistance from a dedicated team built based on the needs of those businesses. So it's a bit of a concierge service designed to work with business. That's led by my department, and it's delivered jointly with various partners, such as my fellow panelist, David Lisk, who's responsible for the National Research Council's Industrial Research Assistance Program. So perhaps I will stop there, but just to say that I hope this was a useful overview of some of our programming. We have made significant investments and launched significant programs in the last few years, all in support of innovation, in support of green and clean technologies, and be really happy to talk about that a bit more in the discussion. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister Kennedy. It was insightful indeed, and it was also very interesting compared to what State Secretary Hirayama said before, the bottom-up approach of Switzerland here with Canada, showing a few more top-down examples of innovation fostering. This will give us interesting discussion topics later on. And I have the privilege to introduce to you David Lisk. He was mentioned already. David is the Vice President of the Industrial Research Assistance Program, IRAP, at the National Research Council of Canada. David has a very impressive business background at CEO level in the ICT sector, the information communication telecom sector, where he worked in very competitive sectors such as semiconductors. He studied electrical engineering and holds an MBA from the University of Ottawa. And when David thinks about Switzerland, it's the Swiss educational system that comes to his mind. So with that, I'd like to hand the floor to David.
Thank you, Nick, for the introduction, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for folks around the world. And it's really my pleasure to be invited in helping with this panel today. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the National Research Council has offices across Canada, which are located on unceded, shared, current, and traditional territories of Indigenous peoples. It's our responsibility in the spirit of reconciliation to improve our understanding of and relationships with local Indigenous communities and their cultures. So at the National Research Council, our vision is to bring about a better Canada and a better world through excellence in research and innovation. We seek to impact advancing knowledge, applying leading edge technologies, and collaborating with other innovators. International partnerships are key to our success, and today, with the cloud of the recent events This has truly underlined the importance of international cooperation. We have 14 research centers and over 2,000 researchers and engineers located in various locations across Canada, and the NRC is the largest federal research and development organization in Canada. Every year, teams of our scientists and engineers and business experts work with thousands of partners across the country and internationally. The NRC's environmental research priorities are focused in 4 areas: climate change mitigation, climate change adaptation, environmental protection, and clean technologies. Our clean technology research has us on the forefront of advancements in zero-emission vehicles, biomaterials, reducing the carbon footprint of plastics and other manufactured goods, and many, many more. Also, we provide direct interaction and support to innovative Canadian businesses through the Industrial Research Assistance Program, which I have the pleasure to be the Vice President. And you can see behind me the big 75s. We are celebrating this year our 75th anniversary of the program since its inception in 1947. Now, since then to now, we've grown quite a bit and we are doing some different things, but we still focus on small, medium-sized companies. We work with, either through advice or direct funding, over 8,000 companies every year. Many of these are in the clean tech market, clean water market, etc. And since 2015, we have invested over 140 million Canadian dollars in funding and have supported almost 400 different companies across Canada. We've also introduced new initiatives around clean tech, and one example is the Clean Tech Fast Pilot Program, where we support a company to work with a partner and deploy their product, their solution into the field to demonstrate that it works for the potential buyer. This has been quite successful in de-risking the engagement that a potential buyer would have. Now, we have lots of international programs that further support clean tech companies, and Eureka was mentioned as one of them. And we have a very strong relationship with Switzerland. And through our partnership with InnoSwiss, IRAP has provided almost $5 million Canadian in support of co-development and collaborative projects with on 11 different partners and projects with Switzerland. Collaboration projects have been facilitated through Eureka, as I mentioned, and the platform has been a very strong mechanism where our companies can meet Swiss companies and grow and deploy together. Now, before closing, I would like to share that the National Research Council's Jennifer Littlejohns, who's going to be speaking about specific hydrogen opportunities a little bit later in the program. As well, during the network sessions, please drop into the NRC virtual network session group room if you wish to discuss topics further with my colleagues. I look forward to the conversation and opportunities that are going to arise out of the event and continue to be building on our successful relationships that we have developed over the years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Thanks for your insights and your positive comments and your hands-on advice to get things going. That's great. That's exactly what we all want. Now, and our next speaker, I'm happy to introduce as André Kudelski. André is the chairman and CEO of the Kudelski Group, which has a number of companies that are active in the digital security and content delivery space. André is also, and that's the main reason why he's here, the president of InnoSwiss, which is the Swiss Federal Agency for Innovation. He holds various seats on boards in business as well as in academia, and he's studied physical engineering at EPFL, the Technical University in Lausanne. When André thinks of Canada, it's also the big space, that comes into his mind, but also water and geology. Why geology? He may share with us later. The floor is yours now, André, on an introduction of InnoSuisse.
Thank you. So good morning, good afternoon. Sorry, a little bit of sun in the eyes, but would like first to give you a few words regarding InnoSuisse, the federal agency for innovation in Switzerland. So what we look for is value creation, job, highly skilled creation, IP, and business model. But I propose maybe to have a first slide to illustrate the elements I would like just to share with you. So maybe as a first slide, we have the question of the funding. We have fundamentally so maybe it's the next one. For 2021, we have funded 457 million Canadian dollars in terms of innovation, with the big share being project funding. Fundamentally, the approach of InnoSuisse is bottom-up to give the opportunity for the best idea, best project to be funded. And what we do is give access to best of academia in terms of research to companies in a way that they can innovate and come with new ideas as an element to show what have we done with, Canada. First, InnoSuisse and NRC have collaborated since 2012 within the framework of Eureka. And if we look more recently, since 2018, we have had the signature of a joint statement on science, technology, and innovation that have allowed us to work in Cleantech. In 2021, so last year, we have an international R&D network event on clean hydrogen technology, and that is a topic of high interest these days. And today, we have this Suisse-Canadien Cleantech Innovation Summit. Fundamentally, Switzerland has a strong research and, what is quite specific, a very strong network of SMEs. One of the elements that make Switzerland, if not unique, at least pretty strong, is to have very innovative SMEs in addition to startups. And Cleantech is one of the important topics for these companies. If we look between 2013 and 2020, InnoSuisse has invested 350 million in Swiss Competence Center with the element of Cleantech and energy as part of the element, with an important outcome. If we look into 2021, InnoSuisse have funded 230 new innovation projects with companies in fields of energy, environment, and energy. And going forward will only increase it. And if we look at achievements, we see that some very innovative and quite disruptive company has come out of InnoSuisse funding. If you look at Climeworks, it's a very interesting company, starting as a startup and now being more a scale-up, that is one of the world leaders in CO2 capture and having made important installation, including in Iceland, in order to capture CO2. And that are just few examples of what we can see in terms of boosting the innovation with this fundamental mission to do not only things domestically, but through international collaboration, being able to achieve much more, since Switzerland is geographically a very small country. So through international cooperation, we can really have a much higher impact on clean energy. Thank you for your attention, and see you in a few minutes.
Thank you very much, André. That was very interesting and concrete. That's great. So let me now welcome everybody who has been introduced already and gave a few introductory remarks to a brief panel that allows us to look back on what was stated and to engage in a first level discussion as to where the two countries can learn from each other, where maybe the differences are, where the parallels are. And actually, I wanted to start out with State Secretary Hirayama. would you be in a position to tell us, if you look at now the differences in approach, Switzerland and Canada, there is this component of you saying we're strictly bottom up, and Canada featuring a couple of top down approaches. Why is that? Why is this difference? Why is the Switzerland bank on the bottom up approach? Could you provide us with some more insights there, if you may?
Thank you very much. I think this has a lot to do with our culture and also with our democracy. We are used to have a real direct influence on all the decisions taken by the government. And I think this also influences research and innovation. So this is one point. The other point is that we always believe that the best ideas, what to do for the future in research and innovation, the best ideas have the scientists and neither the government nor the administration. I give you one example. In Switzerland, we have so-called NCCRs. These are Centers of Excellence in Research. And we started more than 10 years ago with the first NCCR on quantum technologies. Nowadays, everybody talks about quantum technologies. But if we would have had to wait for the government or the administration to suggest a network in quantum technologies, we would have been far too late. So we think really we have made good decisions in letting our researchers go ahead. And this is one thing. And the other thing is, of course, we strongly always are committed to the bottom-up system, but we do not work in a purely bottom-up system. So we also are able to use instruments to set certain topics, and then if we set the topic, then we let the researchers apply for funds in this topic. So it's then a mixture between bottom up and top down. And I think setting topics and having instruments being completely open for bottom up ideas, I think this is one of our secrets of success.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting. Maybe if I could hand over the question back to Simon, in the sense, you see a need, and David may add there, you see a need for a top-down approach. The obvious question is, so who decides on which areas to focus on in the decision-making process? If it's the government alone, who in the government, how is it assured that the right fields are picked top-down? Would you mind, Simon, giving us a bit more thoughts on that?
Sure, Nick, no problem. Maybe what I would say to begin is I don't think it's an either-or situation. Canada for a very long time had, I would say, and this is a personal opinion, but a policy approach in which our real emphasis was on bottom-up approaches, having, strong investments in our research ecosystem, low taxes, a good macroeconomic, framework. We've been a world leader in negotiating free trade agreements with countries all around the world. So we've had an approach of having these broad frameworks with a view that the private sector is best left to sort of, take advantage of those. I think that the views have evolved over time, however, because what we saw, despite having excellent broad framework policies, is we weren't necessarily getting all the benefits out of our innovation. Our innovation ecosystem. Business investment in R&D in Canada traditionally has been quite low. A lot of the intellectual property developed, by Canadian science would be commercialized elsewhere, such as in the United States. And so I think there's been a growing sense that we have to complement very good bottom-up policies with kind of very well thought out, kind of more top-down or more active industrial policy type directions. And that's in effect what Canada's doing. I think it's not about picking winners in the sense of we like this company, we don't like that company. I would characterize it more as we want to be active in areas where there are obvious, and I don't want to sound too wonky, as we say in English, but like where there are market failures or where there are obvious, very strong public policy interests that maybe are there, but which the market perhaps doesn't recognize. So to give you an example, I mean, there are in Cleantech, there are obvious failures in terms of proven technology that's hard to bring to commercial scale because that's not really how the financial sector works. They're used to financing projects that they understand with risks that they understand, and so you can have technology that works, but where the execution risks are sort of uncertain, and as a result, it's hard to get funding. Well, that's a market failure the government can help to de-risk. So that's just one example. I would also say, and then I'll stop because I know we want to get to the other panelists, but we also have areas, as Switzerland does, where we have acknowledged excellence and where the government's policy might be to try to double down and build on that excellence. And so it's not so much about individual companies as much as it is about sectors or areas of strategic advantage where we have something to offer. So a good example of that would be on quantum materials and quantum science, quantum computing, where Canada has acknowledged, world leadership. We don't want to lose that. But the market is not at a space yet necessarily where if we just let the market run its course, that we'll be able to maintain that kind of leadership advantage. So we're investing in quantum. Another would be artificial intelligence, and machine learning, where again, Canada has huge strengths in that space. We're probably ranked, third or fourth in the world when it comes to AI. That's as a result of government policy, and that's been a magnet. It's been a magnet for Cleantech, but also other companies to come to Canada because they have access to all of this AI talent. And so it's less about we like this particular firm, and it's more about we actually think AI is an area of strategic strength for the country. So that's just two examples. So top down doesn't always mean individual companies. It can mean areas of strength, or it can mean areas where there's a public policy interest to advance.
Super, Simon, thanks a lot. David, would it be possible for you to very briefly add to that with maybe a focus specifically on Cleantech? So if we have these statements by Simon and Martina in terms of the general directions of the government. If you take the Cleantech view, is it particularly important in Cleantech to go bottom up or top down, or to have that mix?
So Canada, as Simon has mentioned, has evolved to interact in markets more specifically from a very bottoms-up approach. And we have seen successes when we do that. And so in the interventions in the Cleantech space in particular, because Canada's regulations are evolving, its tax regime is evolving also around this kind of market, being able to help the companies get into the market with their products so that they can be deployed inside of Canada and hopefully globally, because Canada, as you know, it may be a big country, but it's a smaller population, and we live beside a neighbor who's 10 times our size. And so if we want to have relevance in the world and to succeed economically, we have to be able to export. And hence, Cleantech collaborations with companies in other countries is quite important. And then putting in place specific targets, regulations, and then, as Simon mentioned, top-down intervention can help Canadian companies to succeed on the world stage. Super.
Thank you very, very much, David. Andre, as a last question in this round to you, from your perspective as the president of Suisse, this important position of basically, setting up the innovation programs and playing this little bit top down as much as Switzerland plays top down. Is there in your current policy toolbox something that is missing? Do you need something more, or are you quite happy with what's available there right now?
First, we should never be happy with the current situation, because if we are successful today, it's because maybe good or not bad decision has been taken a few years ago. Having said that, and coming back to this approach bottom up, top down, the reality is that we need a real combination between the two. And take the element of bottom up, it has one fundamental virtue. It's allowing to have the best new ideas that are not on the radar screen to emerge. At the same time, we need to have some top-down approach for the later development of some technologies. And as we have discussed before, Cleantech, artificial intelligence, elements in digitalization are elements that are important for the future of the world. And fundamentally, we need in the acceleration phase to add elements to make that becoming a reality. As you have the theory and the practice, In theory, you may be fine, but in practice, you need sometimes during the development, in the scaling up of some technologies, some, how to say, extra effort made in a way that you can become, as a country, more relevant on the international scene.
Great. Thank you very much. Andre, I think your remark that we should never be happy in innovation and always try to look forward is spot on. Okie doke. So we'll go to our next program element, and we've now sort of covered and learned from 4 distinguished innovation specialists on the higher level issues that are government linked. Let's now look at some more sort of applied industry perspectives, and for this I have the pleasure to, as the first contributor, introduce to you Robert Itschner. He's the country managing director of ABB Switzerland. And believe it or not, Robert has been with ABB for almost 30 years, starting in 1993 when I was still at university. He started as a software engineer. He ended up as the CEO, so he must have done a good job. Robert has degrees in electrical engineering and computer sciences. He studied in both the US and Switzerland. And when he thinks of Canada, he thinks of space. But he probably also thinks about ABB Canada. So with this, Robert, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction, and thank you for having me here. You have already mentioned the fact that we are present in Canada. ABB is a global company. Just to give you a very short overview, present in 100 countries. We have more than 100,000 employees worldwide, pretty much balanced across the big regions, as you can see below. And we're also present with sizable operations both in Canada as well in Switzerland. In both countries, we are proud to be a good employer, a recognized employer, and as AB overall in both countries, innovation is key to our differentiation, is key to our success. ABB is considering itself as a technology leader and therefore also invests considerable amount of money. Last year, we spent 1.2 billion in R&D globally, which is some 4.2% of our revenue. So this is definitely key to us to perform. We are also very much keen of the challenges of the time and have set ourselves targets. This was communicated in 2020, and I will just focus on the left here, as today we talk about Cleantech. We have committed ourselves to actually drive for carbon neutrality in our own operations, but we have also made a statement that we would want to help our customers reduce their CO2 emissions by 100 million tons per year. This is obviously quite an ambitious target, but as we will maybe see in a minute, we believe that this is feasible with the solutions that we can provide. In the meantime, we have solidified these commitments. We have signed up to science-based targets for the 1.5 degrees Celsius target, and also set ourselves intermediate targets for 2030. We have also committed with the climate group to their initiatives called EV100, RE100, and EP100. So we will electrify our entire fleet, road-based fleet, by 2030. We will source only renewable power for our operations also by 2030, and we will dramatically increase energy efficiency in our own operations. Just to give a bit of more specific insight to what is it that we're actually talking about. What is ABB doing in terms of solutions that address the sustainability? And here we just have a couple of examples. So from electric charging infrastructure for electric mobility, also electric mobility both based on trains and also buses. This is definitely a core activity of ABB. And I'm usually using some of these examples also to demonstrate a little bit the development of technology in a certain time period. So on the bottom left here, you can see a wind turbine. We are not building the wind turbine. We are supplying the converter, power electronics package, which is sitting in the nacelle, which is this little box behind the rotor up here, for this 12 megawatt wind turbine. This wind turbine is 260 meters tall and has blades of 110 meters. And I remember very well as a younger engineer, not so long ago, maybe 10, 12 years ago, we were pretty excited about the 2 megawatt wind turbine Now we have the 12 megawatt, we talk about 15 megawatt. So development of technology is obviously rapid, and if the boundary conditions are right, if companies like ourselves see markets, the development will also happen. Very shortly also on the buildings, to the right bottom is a very innovative building that also won a prize here in Switzerland. Its facade is covered with photovoltaics. It has a controlled building automation system from ABB and a very smart heating system. So this building is producing excess electricity in summer, which is then used in a power to gas application, which is a pilot by one of the universities in Rapperswil to produce gas, which then in winter is consumed to heat the building. So this could be considered as a climate neutral apartment building, but it is a fully commercial project. So that's maybe also indicative of the fact that a lot of technologies are available today to make a significant difference in terms of sustainability.
Robert, thank you very, very much for this. I love your final remark that a lot of it is available today. It needs to be deployed. And I think it's great that the companies such as ABB has such ambitious targets and also lives up to them by actually delivering the innovation that is necessary for those targets. Let me now introduce our last contributor, Jason Myers. Jason has a fascinating position in as the CEO of Next Generation Manufacturing Canada, or NGen, because NGen is actually the one running the superclusters we heard about before. The Advanced Manufacturing Supercluster Initiative is what Jason is directly responsible for. He brings together in this position large and small companies. So we'll speak a little bit more about the smaller companies with Jason. And before he was at NGen, he actually headed Canada's largest industry and trade association. So he's very familiar with the issues that concern businesses when it comes to this interaction between government and business. Like me, he's an economist, and we both have studied at the London School of Economics. Different from me, Jason went on to Oxford and also lectures in Oxford still. When he thinks about Switzerland, Jason thinks about precision, which we as Swiss like very much, and therefore give him the reward about the thinking of Switzerland in the thinking of Switzerland category. Jason, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nick. I'm really pleased to be here, and I'm speaking to you from the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Tobacco peoples, really located right in the middle of the Great Lakes in southern Ontario, and it's been the center for trade for hundreds of years. So it's in that context that I'm really pleased to be able to say a few things about business opportunity, innovation, partnership opportunity between Canada and Switzerland. Let me tell you a little bit about Next Generation Manufacturing Canada. In any case, as Simon was saying, we're one of the superclusters that have been supported by the federal government. Our focus is building world-leading advanced manufacturing capabilities in Canada. Thanks very much. And the way we operate is to bring together the research, the incredible research, the strengths, the startups, the smaller companies, the technology companies and manufacturing, bring them together to create really unique solutions in manufacturing, and many of those solutions in Cleantech. Maybe the next slide, please. We do four things as an organization. We first of all identify and promote capabilities across Canada. We have amazing capabilities ranging from research to actual production capabilities, and of course a lot of tech capabilities in many sectors. Simon spoke about some of them. Many of these are our best kept secrets. Our focus is how do we connect the assets that we have between research and technology and manufacturing to, as I say, create applications that really have tremendous potential in terms of commercialization, but also potential in terms of making real progress in improving environmental sustainability. We fund collaborative industry-led projects that lead to world-leading capabilities in manufacturing. I think it's important to point out here the the importance of the collaboration of integrating various technologies to develop unique solutions, to unique applications. And we play a very important role in supporting the scale up of the application, the testing, the demonstration, and the piloting of those applications to prove that they are viable in full-scale manufacturing production. And this model is really developing tremendous benefits. We have about 80% of our projects have a Cleantech application that ranging from greenhouse gas reduction to circular manufacturing of materials to the development of not only electric vehicles, but the entire electric vehicle value chain. Here, we've our completed projects so far, we've invested about $45 million in projects that are completed and that are now being commercialized. To date, that the revenue from those projects is about $1.85 billion. So it's over a 40x rate of return on our investments, and delivering about 6 times the 6-time rate of return to the federal government in terms of new taxes raised on that revenue. So very, very successful projects from a commercial basis. But as I said, also focusing on real outcomes in terms of environmental sustainability. We're exceptionally proud that one of our projects has just been named by UNESCO as a top 10 AI application in the world in pursuit of the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. It was the only project in Canada, only 2 in North America. The other one was led by NASA. So we're investing in really incredible projects that have an impact on environmental sustainability. But we're also supporting workforce development and the ability of companies to manage innovation, which I think are 2 factors that are extremely important in maximizing the commercial potential of these new applications of technology, particularly in industry. So one more slide. As we go forward, there are 3 very, very important areas that we're focusing on that have relevance to clean tech applications. The one is the entire electric vehicle supply chain or value chain, ranging from not only the extraction of critical minerals, but their processing, the development of sensors and anodes, the application of new materials, lightweight materials, the development of powertrain of electric motors, and then finally vehicle assembly itself. And most of that value chain, of course, is in the middle between mineral extraction and assembly. So we're focusing on that entire value chain. We're looking to support the industrial decarbonization or the development of technologies that can be used in the decarbonization of industrial processes, and also technologies that can be used in the circular manufacturing of materials. We work very closely with IRAP. We work very closely with other federal funding agencies like SIF that Simon was speaking about. But it is this focus on being able to integrate technologies in industry to develop viable, manageable engineering solutions that can actually make a difference in industry. That is really the sweet spot of our activity. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you very much. That was really interesting. So, Robert, if I could start with you, if you look at as ABB at a supercluster, the maybe somewhat daring question, is a supercluster something that a large company such as ABB needs, and how does it differ if you are an SME, if you could put yourself as a large company into the perspective of a smaller one? Could you maybe address this specific point that interests me a lot?
As we heard before, also in Switzerland, the major portion of R&D is done by the private sector, some 75%. So that's for sure something that needs to be considered. But where I see the value of superclusters is really to create connections between various partners that then drive innovation. And that's maybe an advantage of a large company, that we can spin these networks on our own. We have a collaboration, for example, with Ballard, which is headquartered in Vancouver, for a solution for a fossil-free propulsion system for large ships with their fuel cells, just as one example. but we are partnering with various other companies in the AI space. I have an example where we are working with a customer to use robotics to sort waste for recycling, which works exceedingly well. So you will need more and more partners, and ABB is collaborating with universities, with other companies, and there I think is the value, as far as I can judge, the concept of superclusters really in creating these connections and making sure people find each other that have similar interests and complementary competences.
And if I understand you correctly, that's the same for an SME than it is for a large corporate, really.
Yeah, I think an SME may benefit even more so from a little bit of support in creating these connections. As you saw, I mean, we are sizable organizations in Canada, for example. I mean, this is a large organization, so we tend to have networks of a certain quality already. But there I would see that smaller companies might benefit even more from the support of such structures.
Very, very good. Jason, very briefly to round off on you guys coming from sort of the practical side of innovation support. This list that you showed at the end, where you think these are the key areas to focus on, could you just give us a bit of background? So did you do this list, or was this list done with the ministry? What was the process of arriving at this specific list?
No, that's a list of activities or opportunities, I guess, for investment. Those are areas of investment where we know that industry is willing to put their money here and we know where collaborative funding would come from. So it's a reflection of the interest where industry wants to invest in collaborative, transformative types of technology applications. And primarily, I mean, they align very well with the innovation objectives of the government, but this is industry-led. I also wanted to say, and ABB is a project partner in a couple of our projects, and so really appreciate their contributions and commitment. But to pick up on what Robert was saying about small companies, by bringing smaller companies, and particularly technology companies, together, it provides them an opportunity to integrate their technology into a solution where it wouldn't otherwise be manageable by a manufacturing company or necessarily brought to market in the first place because it has to be integrated into a more generalized engineering solution. I think there's tremendous opportunity for smaller companies in that type of collaboration as well as the direct collaboration with companies like ABB.
Super, thank you very much, Jason. Okay, Doc, I think that it was really insightful on how these focus areas become defined, and also large companies, small companies, both needing a bit of glue to bring about systemic innovation together. I think that was really interesting. I'd like to, though, bring in a new aspect that we haven't discussed yet, and I would I'd like to direct the question to State Secretary Hirayama. We haven't talked about academia yet. From your perspective, please give us sort of your views on how important are the universities in this game. We've spoken about the practical things, but somehow they seem important too. Could you shed some light on that, please?
So thank you very much. From my perspective, universities are very important partners in innovation. So usually universities are strong in basic science, seeking out for new knowledge, trying to find answers to questions. And I think for a strong innovation, it's important to have also a strong funding system for basic research and a strong university system. So what's the bridge from basic science to innovation? I think the knowledge and technology transfer is really not a very easy thing to do, and I'm sure Andre will be able to talk about this later on, because this is actually exactly where we in Switzerland need our innovation funding agency, because they enable companies, and especially small and medium-sized companies as well as startups, to get access to this university knowledge. The bigger companies, usually they have their own large research and development departments with good access to university research, but this is not the case for the smaller companies. And this is where we try to help to have a bridge. And therefore, it's of course important that the SMEs and the startups have a clear vision about the market, about the business case, and to bring this market knowledge and science knowledge together. That's very important for technology transfer. The academia is of crucial importance.
And if I understand you correctly, both the high level at the ETHs or EPFLs, but also the applied level at the applied universities, correct?
Absolutely. You see, you have a value chain, you have a development chain, and it's important to see that also the University of Applied Sciences help heavily to build the bridge between basic science and innovation than in companies. Usually, if they do applied research, they are already quite a bit closer to the market than, I don't know, searching for answers in basic research. So I think one mistake which is quite often made is to think that if you have a very interesting discovery in basic research and you have an idea what to do with this on the marketplace, then actually the innovation is done. That's not the case at all. So you have to solve so many practical questions, thinking about production technologies, for example. It's a completely different thing if you have, I don't know, 1 milligram in a lab, or you want to prepare a ton in a company. And this is an enormous step. And also here, the University of Applied Sciences can really help, because usually the professors there, they have experience in companies. So they know usually how to run a production site. And so this helps a lot. And I think in Switzerland, this cooperation between the cantonal universities, the ECHs, and the universities of applied sciences, together with the companies funded by 2 funding agencies, one focused on basic research and one of innovation, for the Swiss system, which is a small system. You shouldn't forget, if you look at Canada and Switzerland, there is quite a size difference. So for the Swiss system, I think this is quite interesting.
Very interesting. Thank you very, very much for this. I'd like to bring it to David quick, because I assume, your position at the National Research Council and you representing of Canada, having a somewhat top-down approach as well to innovation. Could you explain a little bit how do you make this bridge between defining the research topics and defining the innovation topics, right? What's the link? What's the link there, and how do you manage that?
NRC is a very much an applied research organization. There is some primary research done, but much of the work is connecting academia and companies together through our researchers, and you'll hear a little bit more about that. We use challenge programs to identify, from a top-down perspective, we use challenge programs to identify needs within the country, or to support policy, or to support a gap, such as materials for clean fuels. We're doing, high throughput networks to help the North have communication capability, quantum sensors, Arctic and Northern product development. And these challenge programs are, at their core, a group of NRC researchers and connectivity into firms, but whether they're a multinational firm or a large company, or whether they're SMEs, and also into academia. And they're brought together through a funding model to attempt to solve these challenges. They're high reward, high risk interventions. So that's one mechanism that's being used in Canada. That is a combination of top down with bottoms up. And I think Simon spoke quite well about the fact that Canada still has a lot of bottoms-up work that is being done. And to the comment from about Switzerland, the primary or exploratory research done at our universities is very much a bottoms-up approach.
Very interesting. Thanks a lot. André, could I ask you from InnoSuisse's current programs and strategy, if we look at cleantech innovation in particular, is there an emphasis on cleantech, or if you agree that it is an important area of innovation, how do you assure that area gets enough of attention from the perspective of InnoSuisse?
You have many different aspects. First, historically, we have, through a special program in energy, being able to get traction in this field. Now, if I'm coming back to some of the key principles, value creation, and it's not only economic, it may be also societal, it's an element that can also give some extra momentum to cleantech. Now, one element that I think is important that have maybe not been said until now is one of the virtues of a funding agency like InnoSuisse is basically to give the opportunity for academia and university to do a research that may have some application in the private sector, and cleantech is today one of the rising stars in this field. And so fundamentally, seen from the university point of view, there is an opportunity to get more funding, that is a competitive funding that will allow to do things that have a real impact on society. And that is, for me, a way to combine, in a way, a bottom-up approach with elements that are really needed by our society at scale. And finally, through international collaboration, I think that's one of the best possible paths for exploring bigger scale cleantech opportunities.
Super, thank you very much, André. Let's move to an important question of innovation. It was mentioned before by State Secretary Hirayama about scaling up and getting the 1 gram to the 1 ton, basically. Simon, you were the one mentioning at the beginning the need for rapid deployment of innovation in cleantech, given the challenges that we face with climate and related areas. Can I ask you, in this scaling up process, what do you think is most important, and what does Canada do right for scaling up, apart from the superclusters that we've discussed, if you may?
Sure. I mean, I would say, again, just sort of my own observations. This is probably one of our biggest challenges with regard to technology adoption in Canada writ large. I mean, quite apart from cleantech, but we'll talk about cleantech, obviously. We have a very good system for developing new ideas. We have a very good system for basic research. If you look at the number of clean tech startups in Canada, just the sheer number of tiny companies coming out of universities and so on, we're actually a world leader in that space. Like, there is no question we have a lot of, great ideas and great young companies. Where we have traditionally really struggled is in turning those into world scale, large scale firms. And that is a function of a bunch of things. I think it's a function partly of policy. We have traditionally, for a very long time, had a lot of programs in support of small businesses, SMEs. We have very good macro kind of framework policy. It's Canada's a good place to start a business, and we've invested heavily in research. So we have a lot of IP coming out of universities, a lot of these small companies, and they have access to small business support programming. Where we've tended to have a problem is there's been a bit of a valley of death between some of those early supports for very small companies And then the ability to kind of cross this valley as you scale up and you actually prototype and you develop commercial solutions and you actually prove yourself out. Once you prove yourself out, once you actually get some clients, once you actually have a product that works and you've demonstrated it works and you make some sales, then the financial system, institutional investors are willing to put the money in. So at kind of both ends of the valley, there's support. Where there has traditionally been a problem is in that scaling area, that scaling support to actually start to grow the business, secure customers, prove out your technology. And that is the space where the government now is becoming much, much more active, not just through David Lisk's organization, but through our Strategic Innovation Fund, through we have a kind of a state organization, we call it a Crown Corporation, that invests specifically in clean technologies. It's called Sustainable Development Technology Canada. It has about $1 billion budget, and it does nothing but invest in clean tech companies. So we're trying to do a lot more to, once we get the small company off the ground, actually sustain it so we can get to launch. And I would say so access to capital, Nick, is a critical area. The other thing I would say would be, one of the things that the academics would say is that one of the things that actually makes scaling easier is if the broader ecosystem is such that it supports scaling. And we don't have a lot of large anchor companies in the clean tech space, arguably. And we've seen in other sectors that actually having a very large anchor company is helpful, because the large anchor company, the domestic anchor company, is a source of talent, it's a source of capital. And then frankly, if the small company wants to sell out, they want to exit and go start another company somewhere, they can exit to the large anchor company. The large anchor company becomes like they become the purchaser, or they become the patron of these smaller firms. And whether it's in life sciences or clean tech or a few other sectors, we don't have these huge multinational companies in this space. So what's tended to happen is you get a really great idea, it starts to take off, and a huge anchor company in the US, a big corporate in the US or Europe, will say, ooh, that's really interesting, we're going to buy that company. And so the company gets sold to a foreign player. And so, the government has been doing more work in recent years, for example, to build up the venture capital ecosystem, to create off-ramps so that Canadian firms that maybe want to sell, or they're looking for scaling capital, they don't have to turn to the US, they don't have to leave the country, they can stay in the country. So there's a variety of things that we're doing, but I would say scaling is a big problem for Canada, particularly because we're a small open market economy, mostly SMEs, and we're trying to create an environment through the superclusters, but through other instruments, where getting access to capital to scale, getting access to talent, having options. If you want to grow your company, you have more options than what you might have had in the past, which is perhaps to take your company abroad. The other thing I would say is that because of the pivot to net zero, Canada is a very energy intensive company. We have a very large energy sector. We have a very large automotive sector. We have very large industrial verticals that traditionally have been big sources of emission. Agriculture is another, although agriculture is a bit trickier because it tends to be a lot of smaller point source emission from farms as opposed to big corporates. We're working very hard now, and this is through our Net Zero Accelerator and the government's climate action plan, the government's climate plan. How do we work with big verticals to decarbonize them? And how do we connect up the great clean tech that exists in Canada with these huge needs of the oil and gas industry and the agriculture sector and the transport sector to try to pull some of that clean technology into those industries that are looking to decarbonize and looking to become greener in the next couple of decades.
Very interesting. Robert, from the perspective of ABB, do you see yourself as an anchor company in Switzerland? Do you understand this type of thinking of having the need for these anchor companies?
I definitely see companies like ABB as anchor companies, and I think we're playing this role not only in Switzerland. I remember we did an acquisition in Canada a while ago of a very innovative company which is doing rail electrification and has a smart solution to feed back braking energy into the network. So this is reality, and I think all large companies are scouting for innovation also through these means. Looking at the role of government a little bit more broadly, however, here I would also stress the point that governments can help the scaling of innovation also by setting standards, demanding or allowing the markets also to expand in various geographies, and in Switzerland also we still have regulation in some areas which is simply blocking also progress. And I think there is definitely another role of government which may not be related so much to R&D and academia, but to setting standards, opening up markets, making sure that innovative concepts actually are finding the market, because that's where capital will be freed up and flow freely into these solutions, and at least we will achieve scaling.
I understand you correctly. You mean remove the bad regulation that fosters the dirty tech, but also put regulations in place that incentivize.
I wouldn't put it in these absolute terms, but just to make a very small practical example, in some places in Switzerland, we still can, if I would have a surplus of PV power on my roof, I could not deliver it to my neighbor without making a contract with the local utility, which is obviously simply a lot of complexity to manage. I'm using this very simple example just to highlight the concept. I think we need to liberate parts of the markets also to allow this innovation to really happen.
Yeah.
Another example, we have a fantastic solution for optimizing energy use and energy consumption across sources and sinks for large sites, industrial sites, and so on. So if you have a model in the market where this is actually where you actually get the benefit out of that by optimizing your energy intake at certain times during the day, for example, this will decrease power consumption quite significantly, because companies will find ways to optimize around these constraints.
Very interesting, Robert. Thank you. Last question before we run out of time. I want to shift away a little bit from the regulation again and highlight one aspect that I think Switzerland may have something to offer to Canada in terms of innovation, and that's the vocational training system. Could State Secretary Hirayama tell us a little bit, is it really so strong in international comparison, and why is it that vocational training is important for scaling innovation in the market?
Yes, in Switzerland, as you mentioned, we have a very strong vocational education and training system. 2/3 of all the young people start their career with an apprenticeship, and that's in an international comparison really, really strong. And what is interesting about this is that it is a dual system. This means the young people, they on the one hand visit school, and on the other hand they work in a company and they learn a lot of things in the company, of course, topics concerning the apprenticeship they do, but also concerning teamwork, social aspects of cooperation, things like that. And this apprenticeship system allows that usually the companies, they offer jobs in areas, they offer apprenticeships in areas where they have jobs later on. So if the job market changes, also the offers in apprenticeship changes. And this is very interesting and helps a lot to keep the young people in future-proof professions, let's say it like this. And of course, these young people, they bring new ideas, new knowledge, also to come back to the small and medium-sized companies who very often have a stable composition of their people in the company, but the young people, they change from time to time the mindset, and so that's important. And one word I want to add, in Switzerland, if you do vocational education and training, you are in a very permeable system. This does not mean that you finish your career with when you finish your apprenticeship. You can continue with a professional baccalaureate, you can continue at the University of Applied Sciences, and there again, then you make the link also to applied research, and that's an interesting combination in Switzerland.
Thank you very much. I think these are really good points to a very specific area of innovation that I think is worth highlighting when these two countries look at cooperating. With this, I'm afraid I have to close the panel and thank everybody for your really insightful comments, honest comments, useful comments that hopefully inspire us all now to concretely try and foster clean tech innovation. We heard from many panelists that this is not just a nice to have and not just relevant for national competitiveness, also for national competitiveness, but it has a direct link to some of the biggest problems that we're all facing together, such as climate change, as Simon put very well at the beginning. I think if we look at this discussion, one thing is clear, or many things, or several things are emerging as being sort of clear, in the sense that there's no right or wrong of top down or bottom up. There are nuances of how to actually do this that depend on your country's idiosyncrasies, on the background, the traditions of the country, that then on which innovation efforts are building up. I think in areas where there is acute urgency and in areas where there is need for systemic type innovation approaches, we've seen that a bit of top-down, be it through an innovation program such as Swiss at that level, or being at the very highest level of government, making priority industry lists, does have a place, because there are government agreements, there are developments that sort of sometimes are above the market, leading even to market failure, as somebody put it in his comments. So I think we cannot, make a list, an easy list as to what has to be done, but we have to build on our mutual strength and try to get them further together. And I think this Innovation Summit that was started with this session today is really a good thing to exactly do this. And I was hesitant to mention this in my introductory comments, but as Deputy Minister Kennedy has kindly done at the beginning, it has even direct relation to the current political situation. If we want to get away from oil and gas, clean tech innovation is the right strategy, and we have a need for scale to do it quickly now. So we have a sort of common interests all the way, and with this forum we have a good basis to work on. And I like to conclude now by giving you quickly the results of the poll. So 50% of all our listeners think that, 50% of all those listening have voted. That's good. That's not a bad turnout. Thank you very much. 33% think that the policy framework conditions are actually the most important things that the government can influence when it comes to innovation. So incentivizing through the framework that drives the market is seen as really important. And also 22% think that funding basic and applied research, I think for obvious reason, is something that is really important in the overall innovation ecosystem space. I think the views differ on the other aspects, and we'll also feature a few questions on this in the follow-up of this panel for listeners to give us some more information, so that everybody involved can learn based on this innovation. I'd like to wish everyone continuously good innovation, stay healthy and stay safe. Thanks very much for being with us. All the best.